President Autopen ran the U.S. government for 4 years. This story is an absolute positive bombshell. We covered it when it was originally reported that Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey had requested an investigation from the Department of Justice into basically who was running the country instead of Joe Biden, because it seems pretty darn clear, and many of us have known this for a long time, it seems pretty darn clear that Joe Biden does not and did not have the mental acuity to do really anything as far as presidential duties, which means that he should have been removed. And the fact that he wasn't removed means that somebody was making decisions. Now, there's been speculation. Nobody thinks it's Kamala Harris is the funny part. There's been speculation that it was aides, interns, Dr. Taco Jill Biden, and even Hunter Biden. All these names have been floated as possible people who were actually making decisions on behalf of the Oval Office for weeks, months, maybe even years. Now, you'd think that a story like that would get picked up across the board, but according to Straight Arrow News, which is you can find at san.com, which, by the way, just as a quick note, it's a great resource. You want to see who's covering a story, or in this case, who's not covering a story? This is the place to go, because they try to keep track of who on the left, center, and right is actually covering particular stories, and then trying to figure out, basically which direction a story leads. In this case, they're talking about the Missouri AG calls for DOJ investigation into claims about Biden's mental fitness. Again, we covered this story a couple of days ago, even though apparently we're not considered media, even though I know for certainty that we get more traffic than at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 of those sites, but whatever. So who covered it? Anybody on the far left? 0. Left? 0. Even left-leaning? 0. We get to the center, and yeah, there was vinnews.com, vinnews.com, and Newsweek covered it. Hot Air, right-leaning site, covered it. Of course, Daily Caller, they covered it. We covered it with them. Daily Wire, redstate.com, patriotnewsfeed.com. Wow. Gateway Pundit, Twitchy, Pamela Geller, and Clash Daily, the good folks over that, one of my favorite sites. But otherwise, nobody on the left covered this, and for obvious reasons. I mean, this is the insinuation here is that not only would this damage the reputation of the Democrat Party and anybody who's involved in the Biden White House, not that either of those need any more damaging, but more importantly, it could, if Andrew Bailey is able to be successful, if Pam Bondi actually does her job, then it's possible that some or even all of the actions taken by the administration for an extended period of time, again, whether it's weeks, months, or years, that's to be determined, but we know that for at least a certain period of time, it was not the President of the United States who was acting as President of the United States. And according to Maura Dowling over at Independent Sentinel, we're going to call whoever was running it President Autopen. I love it. New questions arose over who ran the government when the incapacitated Joe Biden was president, over the use of Autopen, and over unmatching signatures. The question became who was behind the Autopens. Shouldn't we know who was signing executive orders and memos? Autopen signed everything. Heritage Oversight collected everything that Joe Biden had signed over 4 years. Autopen signed every document. Now, we've seen President Trump sit there at those ceremonies. We just had more today. Anytime he's in the Oval Office or wherever he is, sometimes not even in the Oval Office, he goes and he signs an executive order. Somebody tells him what's in it. Sometimes he'll read parts of it. He'll talk about how important it is. He'll sit there. Cameras are blaring. Reporters are asking idiotic questions half the time. And he puts that big, bold signature on there, lifts it up, shows it to everybody, and then moves on to the next one. That is his signature. Apparently, Joe Biden was not actually signing any of the executive orders that he allegedly signed, which means many, if not most, if not all of them, are no longer valid, never should have been valid, and somebody should be investigated and sent to jail. But at the very least, some of his stuff, including pardons, by the way, Anthony Fauci, some of his actions should be reversed. Heritage Oversight gathered every document they could find with Joe Biden's signature throughout his presidency. They all used the same Autopen signature, except for the announcement that the former president was dropping out of the race last year. He had one decision to make, and that was the one. Many didn't believe the president had signed his resignation. Who had the Autopen? Some people need to hang for this. It's treasonous. And according to Mike Howell, there is a constitutional process to deal with an incapacitated POTUS, and it doesn't contemplate giving someone else his Autopen and authority. It's called the 25th Amendment, and the conspiracy not to invoke it in order to keep whatever they were doing going is a big problem. And that's very important, because here's the thing. Somebody was given the option, right? Somebody was given the choice, and maybe multiple people. Maybe it's a conspiracy. We could almost assume that that's the case. But some people had the choice. They could either do what they're supposed to do based upon their duty to the Constitution, which is to invoke the 25th Amendment and declare through the cabinet, through the vice president, that the president of the United States is incapacitated in some way, in this case based upon mental acuity through dementia. And then he is removed, or in this case it's a he. I guess if there's a female president, it would be a she. The president is removed and replaced by the vice president. In this case, it would have been Kamala Harris. But here's the thing. Kamala Harris might be stupid, but she would sign her own stuff. She would basically try to, fail at, but at least try to run the government. It seems as if Joe Biden was not even trying to run the government. He was letting whoever was controlling him, his handlers, do everything for him. He was barely there, essentially. Back to the article. The NSC advisor spills the beans. NSC advisor described Joe Biden as dead, a man who can't say a sentence. He'll be dead in a year. He'll be out of public life. Everybody recognize it. I can't believe it wasn't a bigger scandal earlier. This backs up what Speaker Johnson had said, who Joe Biden didn't remember signing an executive order on liquid natural gas. We've got those videos. I'm not going to play the videos themselves. You've probably already seen them. And if not, I'll leave a link to, if you haven't seen them, you should. One is an undercover O'Keefe Media. James O'Keefe, one of his undercover operatives, went and got somebody to spill the beans from within the White House. And the other one was an interview with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. So you can always go to independentsentinel.com and watch those videos. But here's the investigation request. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey asked the DOJ to investigate whether Biden's cognitive mental decline allowed unelected officials to make decisions without his knowledge or approval. If that's the case, Biden's executive orders, pardons, and other actions may be unconstitutional and therefore void. Guys, I can't stress this enough. This is a huge deal. If somebody else was making the decision as to whether or not to sign an executive order that was allegedly signed by the President of the United States, that executive order does not exist. It is void. It has to be void. The entire intention of signing an executive order is that the executive order itself was signed by the president at the very least. We have to determine, this is a separate issue, but is Autopen, is that valid for executive orders? It's sort of like, I know if you do like a DocuSign, that's technically like an Autopen, but apparently Joe Biden, somebody was imprinting basically, or fake, I should say, I don't know how Autopen works. I assume that it is a physical, it's not just printed on there, that it's actually a physical thing that takes a pen and goes through the motion of signing a document or whatever. Because these are physical documents. These aren't digital. Executive orders we've all seen them. They're in binders, big, beautiful binders, big letters, and there's a big thing at the bottom for the president to sign. And at least with President Trump, we get to see him sign it. Apparently with Joe Biden, somebody else was doing the signing for him. Now, of course, their argument is going to be like, no, he did all the signing. He knew what he was signing. He was just having the Autopen do the physical signature for him. That may actually, believe it or not, that may actually invalidate these. We're not talking about a DocuSign. We're talking about an executive order from the President of the United States of America in my books, that's a no-brainer. I mean, everything that he has done must be called into question. If he was and let's say, forget the signature aspect of it. Let's say he was so incapacitated that he was no longer able to make decisions for himself. That would mean that he would also not be able to make decisions for the nation, in which case, once again, the executive orders should be challenged. Every single one of them should be challenged via lawsuit, via investigation and lawsuit, all the way up to the top. According to, and I did read what Attorney General Andrew Bailey had sent. He's already, the guy is wicked smart, by the way. He's the type of guy you want to see in every state as an attorney general. He made sure that in his request, as a preliminary ahead of any potential lawsuits, he made sure to establish why this is important to him. He's trying to establish standing because, you could say, well, it's none of the Missouri's business that this executive orders were signed. Well, actually it is, as he noted, specifically in regards to pardoned convicted murderers. Okay, in Missouri, that should, by, my non-legal scholar perspective, that should give him standing. But it shouldn't have to come to that. It really shouldn't. His job should be over. At this point, his job, at least in this regard. He sent the request to the Department of Justice. Ball is in their court. They should now be engaged immediately. It should already be in process or in progress. They should be investigating who was doing the signing and start rounding people up. Start questioning everybody who had access to Joe Biden. Which aides, which cabinet members, which interns, which wives, which sons, which brothers, which whoever, who was making decisions about executive actions that Joe Biden allegedly signed. Because if it can be demonstrated that not only did he not sign it, but he was also unaware of what was going on or what was supposedly being signed on his behalf, well, that should nullify everything. And then it's just a question of how long. Do we go back 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, the entirety of his term? Can we nullify, essentially, the executive action aspect of Joe Biden's term in the Oval Office? Now, what's not being covered by anybody so far is the question of the laws. For a law to go into effect, that does require the president to sign it, or for Congress and the Senate to overrule him with a supermajority in both chambers to undo his veto. Well, overturn his veto. Well, if he signed, or if somebody else signed all of these various pieces of legislation into law, and he was not the one who was actually signing it, does that mean that any law passed during Biden's administration, or at least through, we'll call it the dementia period, the lost acuity period, the 25th Amendment, or should have been 25th Amendment period, are any of those laws still valid? People talk about, people in the media, especially legacy media, they talk about how Trump is engaged in this constitutional crisis. Oh my gosh, Elon Musk is becoming a walking constitutional crisis. Blah, blah, blah. Well, this is a true, legitimate, full-blown constitutional crisis. And we need to pay attention to this. We need to make sure that President Trump is apprised of everything that's happening. We need to make sure that Pam Bondi is taking this seriously and putting the full efforts of the Department of Justice behind finding out and determining what crimes were committed. And if they determine that it's not necessarily a criminal action, but there does seem to be reason to doubt the acuity of the President of the United States at the time, Then it will be up to, it'll go back to Attorney General Andrew Bailey, and I'm sure a coalition of other attorneys general in the United States, Republicans, of course, that will then be on them to file suit and to determine basically what did Joe Biden do that they can have overruled. All of this, if it's done right, will make it all the way through to the Supreme Court, and I would imagine that at that point, when it will be unignorable by legacy media and will be a full-blown constitutional crisis, at that point we will truly see if there is this massive flaw in our style of government, because this is it. Okay, this is that constitutional crisis that everybody has been falsely accusing other circumstances and instances of being. This is the one. How will we react as a nation? And honestly, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. The infrastructure here in the United States of America is, how should we put it, challenged. It's old. I mean, it was probably good decades ago, but now it is showing signs of age. And as a result, many Americans would be in a great deal of trouble if there was bad weather or natural disaster or some sort of, God forbid, some sort of attack that would take out the power grid for an extended period of time. Unfortunately, the vast majority of Americans do not have any real backup. I mean, we'd be sitting there waiting for FEMA or the electric company or somebody to turn the power back on. I am a huge fan of solar. The challenge with solar, of course, is that it can get very expensive, usually thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands of dollars to get a good solar generator and system. I have found a good one that is inexpensive, and I mean relatively inexpensive. It's still hundreds of dollars, but at least it's not thousands or tens of thousands. And it's the one that I use. In anytime there's challenges. It's also portable, so even when we go out, throw it in the trunk or the back of the SUV and go camping, go do whatever. It's always good to have a nice portable solar generator with you at the time. For me, I am a huge fan of the Grid Doctor. Go to jdrucker.com/solar. jdrucker.com/solar. And check it out. I think we're on sale right now. Well, I don't want to say right now because it depends on when you're watching this, but at least as of right this very second, there is a nice sale there. So go to jdrucker.com/solar and get you a Grid Doctor 300 today.